Hi, and welcome to Top Dice. My name's Ade, and with us, we've got usual co-presenter, Chris. Say hi, Chris.
All right. Hi, Chris.
Well, today we're going to look at the development of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has been one of the most influential role-playing games, and so very British, that we decided it deserved at least one segment all of its own. Now, we're probably going to be coming back to it in its various iterations. Now, I'm a fan of it. Chris is a
Massive,
huge,
huge
massive
fan
fan.
of it. Massive
Uh,
fan.
Chris, tell me a bit about your first finding of Warhammer.
First finding of Warhammer was it was probably in truth the second role-playing game that I had run for me. A friend of mine called Mark Jacobs. He was in the year below me at school. Um, he decided that he'd sort of run some games at his house, and it just literally went from there. I got my own copy, which unfortunately I don't have. I had to buy another copy, as it usually goes. But that spawned an absolute love for all things fantasy role playing in the style of the sort of grim, perilous world of adventure.
You
Uh,
went grim dark, very grim dark.
I hadn't gone near any other type of fantasy role playing game at that point. I was fully immersed in the whole sort of grim dark aesthetic and way of thinking, and loved the random character generation that you never knew what you were going to get. And I love the fact, I still do, the fact that it's everyday heroes against the
Yeah,
world, you know.
basically it is. It was very British,
Mm,
and or you could argue European, really, I suppose. But
good.
my take on it was a very British role-playing game, and the first one actually of its type. I would go on to sort of suggest as well. So, first edition, was that the one you started with?
It will have been, yeah, first edition. Well, um, I
Let's
think,
have a look at your first edition.
yes, my first edition, the one I actually went near was this one.
Ah, you see, I would actually argue that there is another first edition. Bear with me one sec. There you go. I'll just. Uh,
Yes.
there we go. So that basically is what I would say was first edition for me anyway. Now I know it's not called first edition. You're quite correct. That one actually there is, but that definitely was the predecessor to what you hold in your hand. What you saw there were three small books detailing characters, combat, and magic, and that was it. And you played rather than just an individual character, you played around with small armies, etc. So it was like a role-playing skirmish game almost, and it
So,
had some classic adventures with it.
yeah,
Macbeth, Orcs Drift,
heard
name
of it,
two.
but never actually got a copy of it, unfortunately. So,
White Dwarf carried some
yeah,
articles as well, and had also had some classic adventures in inverted commas for it. But yeah, we'll return to that one that I showed you another time for a look at.
yeah,
But first one, so
mental.
yeah, my memories of that one. I was selling games at that stage, role playing games, when Games Workshop released WFRP, as the local inhabitants in Preston used to call it, and it sold bucket loads. It came out initially, the first incarnation, I remember, was a hardback, big, huge, thick book, as you saw, very durable, rammed full of information, and yeah,
Gorgeous cover.
absolutely great. It was quite unusual, I suppose, because of the character generation, as you sort of said. And for me, it just absolutely rocked. Absolutely
And
brilliant.
apart from the black and white art, you had gorgeous color plates as well.
Yeah.
Uh, much like the sort of, the early editions of Cthulhu, things like that, which is what sort of drew me towards it, but also as well classic fantasy art, such as armies of the undead walking around the place, causing absolute mayhem and havoc.
Yeah, well, that's what you actually sort of had. That's where it all sort of began, I think, in reality. The one I sort of showed you there, it was a very, very early incarnation, and I remember buying that myself in Preston as a youngster, and just really, really sort of being grabbed by it. Things have moved on so much, and we've had several incarnations, which we're going to look at in a second anyway. But yeah, it's a bit of legendary history. I think that's probably the best way to actually sort of put it.
Well,
So, oh
first gave us as well, I think, well, what we're going to call first at least,
yeah,
gave, I think, one of the sort of legendary adventures for this whole setting.
yeah, which was
Which was, I actually have it somewhere. If it's
yeah,
been
the enemy within, I suppose,
Enemy Within, yes, it's
which
somewhere.
was
Enemy Within, here it
yeah,
is. Lovely, lovely campaign. This is part one.
yeah, I remember it well.
You have maps and various other things. It's amazing. I've never actually managed to run all of it. I've tried to start it. I've had it run for me numerous occasions.
Yeah,
It's massive in scope, and the problem is, I think, with all GMs will know that if you introduce any kind of player element to any kind of game, they will literally go off on a tangent, and you'll never see the plot again. So if you have managed to finish this, hats off to you. I salute you. I just don't know how the hell that's possible.
with difficulty would be my argument. It was very difficult. We never actually finished um, a campaign actually of it. We really, really didn't, and that was a bit of a shame, really, all round.
Shame,
But
but
it was basically a hell of a thing. Now, first edition, that was back 1986, I think. If you want to check
that's
the
it.
date on your
The date on, well, because there's two different versions, it got taken over by Hogshead, didn't it?
it
Hogshead.
did, yeah. That Hogshead came later, which so
Yeah,
that's
Hogshead. But the hardback version has a date in it of, you're correct, 1986.
86. Second edition, I remember quite clearly because that would be 2005 because that's the
Yes.
year my daughter was born. So I remember that one quite clearly. I also remember third edition,
Mhm.
and I also remember that was 2009, 2010, and of
Yeah,
course
and
we've got
then
the current
fourth.
fourth version, which is 2018
Yeah,
by Cubicle 7. So we've had quite a few. So first edition, we've covered that. Second edition, move on to that one
yeah,
because that
second.
took it forward a little bit. That
Certainly did.
we'd had the Enemy Within campaign. We'd had Hogshead release quite a few add-ons for it, which was quite good. My favourite actually of the first edition scenario adventures was actually Lichmaster.
Never got to play it. Always saw it advertised, always heard about it, but it was just, one of those things I never got hold of.
That was unusual because it combined Warhammer Fantasy Battle with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and that's probably why it was such a big hit. I remember it distinctly because people used to come in the shop and play it. We had a table there set up, and we used to get the school kids in from Preston coming in with their armies, setting up and playing through, and also role playing as well. So there we go, a little bit of history on that one too as well. And it was Jonathan and Dave, I think, if I remember rightly, at Preston Games that used to play through that. Two school kids that we used to get in that used to work on Saturdays, and kind of oversaw that. So there we go. So anyway, a little bit of a memory there. Second edition. Go on.
Second edition, right. There's the main rule book, second edition.
Now,
Again, beautiful sort of wraparound cover.
now the difference here was actually these were hardback primarily,
Yes.
weren't they?
You can hear that. Also, very much thinner if you compare the two.
Yeah.
If you compare the two, very, very much thinner. But weirdly, absolutely did, well, in my mind, absolutely did not take away anything about the game itself. It actually added to it because it was literally diluted to its sort of essential components, and it was literally all you needed.
Yeah.
And it,
the dog liked it as well.
Yeah, the dog agrees with me, weirdly.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, everyone. Rocky, the Rottweiler, making his presence known.
That's as long as he doesn't chew the book, we're all right.
Oh no.
Okie dokie. So the second one, now there was a whole slew of books came out for that from memory.
Yes.
I think most were hardback. I think there were a couple of softbacks that
I've got a few behind
in
me.
there.
I think from what, if memory serves, and if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. I think most, if not all, were hardbacks.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
I think the whole point of the print run was to make similar looking hardbacks, the spine, etc. You can see it was all
uniform.
All uniform.
Black Library was it Black Library that did them? If I remember it, it's through Green Ronin.
Black Industries.
Black Industries, that was it. Yeah.
Black Industries, who then decided, no, we're not going to be in business anymore. Then they got rid, and it went over to Green Ronin. Took over
Green Ronin. Yeah, that's it. I seem to remember something on that side. Yeah.
And basically, regardless of who took it over, which is quite rare, I suppose, when you think about it, when Green Ronin took over, they kept, from a players and a customer's point of view, they kept the exact design philosophy of what was behind this particular system and sort of incarnation of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. They kept the grimness, they kept the background, they kept the character generation, they kept it all, but they expanded on it in so many different ways for character creation, opportunities to play races that you'd only ever sort of come across, races that were only enemies, including the likes of the Skaven, things like that. There's a whole book dedicated to them.
Yeah.
You could play Norse sort of warriors, chaos warriors, beastmen,
Kislev as well. It took it out that way, didn't it?
Loads, just literally of all
Bretonnian as well.
There's actually a Bretonnian book.
Yeah.
Literally, if you wanted to play a particular character in the Empire or surrounding countries, or the Borderlands, you could create your own Borderland kingdom with one of the books, and literally just the possibilities for second edition were absolutely endless, which is why personally I could literally talk about it for days. Love it. It's absolutely just, to me, the best. It's the best and most complete edition.
Well, we'll come back to this particular subject, Warhammer, again in the future, because it does deserve. Here we're just touching on the basics. So yeah, you'd got all the usual sort of stats that transpose through from the first edition, and to be fair, from my original edition that I mentioned, and also it mirrored obviously Warhammer Fantasy Battle in many ways. Their stat blocks, didn't it? Which
yes, it did.
Made sure it was
a lot of like things similar.
Yeah, it was familiarity, I think, and this is where Games Workshop really won with it. You could pick up the book, you could understand, if you'd played Warhammer Fantasy Battle, you could figure it out. If you played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and you want to switch to battle, again, you weren't starting from scratch. You'd got quite a bit of knowledge there already and access, and you knew what the core essentials actually were and how they worked before you started, which was absolutely fantastic. I think the one thing missing for me from second edition was a large, overarching, decent campaign. Now, there were a couple. There's the Forges one, if I remember rightly, which was a 3-book set of adventures.
Yeah. The for the campaigns and sort of adventures, they kind of it was like the focus of the set of the the overall setting. It wasn't on adventures.
Yeah,
It was on supplement books
yeah,
for different races, kingdoms, and it was more how to play,
yeah,
not what to play, if that makes any sense.
yeah.
Um,
No, you could actually play the enemy within campaign from first edition as well
yeah,
with
it was
sex. That
incredibly easy to convert over.
dead easy. So
Little, if any, work for the GM to actually do.
yeah,
Even what was it? The Doomstones campaign for dwarfs.
yeah,
That was fairly easy. Most adventures in White Dwarf, I think, were just absolutely compatible.
yeah,
The only thing that was different, really, system-wise, was the fact that everything used a D10. There was no different dice,
yeah,
which added to its simplicity.
yeah. Which was
Um,
which was all cool. It did really well, and then unfortunately, it vanished,
yes.
and it vanished for a fair bit of time.
Mm.
Basically, uh, Green Ronin obviously stopped producing it. They
Yeah,
lost the
they lost the
license.
license. I can't remember why. Not going to go into that now.
Nope, that's for another story. But it ended, and the word was it wasn't going to come back. Games Workshop were not interested in role-playing games. They were solely interested in the mass battle games, 40k and Fantasy Battle, and also the
Yeah.
other associated formats around those two that they were actually
Well,
sort of doing and concentrating Man of War and all that.
around that time, from what I remember, role playing itself just took a dive. There
Yeah.
was I can't remember exactly what was going on, but there was just no, nobody seemed that bothered about it. There was no,
Dungeons and
shops,
Dragons
yeah,
was
shops
going
were
on.
closing
Now that was
left, right,
the
and center.
that would have been quite a thing. That I think again we're getting off subject a bit here, but my take on it is Dungeons and Dragons third edition 3.5 had come along,
Yeah, I think,
um,
yeah,
and also
right.
tail end of that, um, it had begun to sort of become so bloated at the market, and
Yes,
it
especially with
it's declining.
the open gaming license.
Mm.
But anyway, that is a subject for another day.
Yeah. Anyway, so it disappeared. It went, um, and then lo and behold, there was an announcement from Fantasy Flight Games,
Mm.
which came as one hell of a shock to
Yeah.
say Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay third edition. In a huge box set, which came in, I think it clocked in at 120 quid and was about
Yeah,
6 kilos,
it
if I
was
remember
huge.
rightly.
Loads
Uh,
of content, massive, it was massive production.
it was huge. Now,
Yeah,
hang on a minute. I'll just switch this. Just bear
there
with
we
me for a
go.
sec. There we go.
There
So
we are.
that was the contents of the box from third edition. I'll leave it behind me for a while, just for effect.
Yeah, soak that in because it looks amazing.
It was a huge thick box set. It's probably one of the biggest box sets I'd ever seen, and that included a board game. Um, I bought it. It was me. I went and
You
purchased it.
did.
I got it on the day it was released.
Yes,
In
I remember
effect,
that you did. I remember the phone call. Get
yeah,
get round here now. It's here.
yeah, and we actually opened it.
We opened it and played it on day of release.
Yeah. Now, it looks great.
Mm.
It was, first we opened it up, and I can't even begin to explain the contents. It was a box that was absolutely rammed full of, I think I can only call it stuff.
Yeah, quality
Uh,
stuff as well, I might add.
it was again high quality components. The quality of the art on the components was absolutely fantastic. The rule books, if I remember right, there were four in there
I
off the
think
top of
so.
my head, including an intro into it. And there were that many bits of punched card
Mm.
that it took us, from memory, it must have been an hour and a half punching the bits of paper a card out and trying to work out what these actually sort of were. Now, unfortunately, the game didn't live up to expectations and became very much a bit of the elephant in the room. Now,
Fortunately.
I'll be quite blunt. Chris myself sat down, tried it, um, and I think was Gareth with us. A couple of other people, I think, with
Yeah,
us
we
as
had a
well.
couple of there was a couple of others with us, and
Muppets, and I think possibly. But anyway, we sat down, we tried it, and it was very confusing. It was essentially a board game that had role playing elements, and
yes.
you needed all the components in that box to actually play it. The setup time took us, I think, another hour to actually get the bits out, to
Yeah,
actually begin putting the
it was
characters together.
and if memory serves, it was due to the nature of how it was set up, because it it was about as far removed from a paper and pencil role playing game
Yeah,
as you could be.
yeah,
But in hindsight, when you give a board game company a role playing game, you're going to get a board game.
yeah.
Simple
Now,
as.
you would, unfortunately, Fantasy Flight had a history of good role playing games as well. And this is one of the unfortunate aspects actually of it. There were some excellent role playing game stuff that it actually sort of brought out, books primarily, and the the essence was actually sort of there, but unfortunately the feel of it just wasn't. The art, as I said, was absolutely great,
Oh, it was stunning.
but the components were so fiddly, and the trackers that you had to use to work out where you were actually at. And the killer actually was in the rule book when
I'll let you say it.
we took a look at it. We got things set up, and we were struggling. We were, all of us around that table were role players of many generations and years, and we knew what we were actually sort of doing. And one of the instructions in the rule book was something along the lines of, it's a grimdark fantasy game. This, if anybody starts playing it with a light sense of humor and
Mm.
makes any reference to Monty Python jokes, deduct them XP.
Yeah,
At that point, we really had
get
enough,
rid.
so we
It was
packed it
gone.
back in the box, and we
Mm-hmm.
decided to run a Savage Worlds version of it instead, which we did.
Yes, which was a damn sight more fun.
It was good, but yeah, unfortunately, that for us was the death of it. Now, I did go on and I did actually purchase a few of the additional box sets that went
Yes,
with it
I remember that.
because I was converting them over. And again, the components and quality of those adventures and box sets were absolutely brilliant. It was just unfortunately the custom dice that was a big issue as well.
That was the big, yeah. To be fair, out of everything, that was the big thing that really killed it off. Well, there's several things that killed it off for me. The fact that you had to build up your character sheet using cards,
Yeah,
and you were
you,
limited.
you needed a box to keep your character
Yeah,
sheet in.
you were limited to the amount of players you could have by
Yes, as well.
components in the
I'll
box,
get rid of that one.
which is, well, basically a money grabbing exercise, if I'm being
Yeah,
blunt. But also as well the system where they're trying to sort of reinvent the wheel of a storytelling sort of style of role playing by using dice.
Yeah.
You tell a story with your mind. You shouldn't need a system as convoluted and complicated as it was to sort of literally pause the game
Yeah.
and then go, oh, well, okay, I've got so and so symbols, I've got those symbols, I've got those symbols. Right, that means the game's the game's dead. It's dead in the water. There's
Yeah.
no there's no
It
flow.
will have its
There's no
fans,
flow.
and do you know what? If you love the game, third edition, that's absolutely fine. That's
Yeah.
your bag, and that is absolutely great for us. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Whilst we've been talking, one thing has kind of sort of come to me actually, and it's going back again to the first edition that you didn't encounter, and that included lots of maps, lots of counters, lots of things like that. And you know what? I'm picking up aspects of that now, although the original Games Workshop version was done very, very well.
Mm.
The artwork was typical Games Workshop again for the floor plans, fantastic. I think that
Yeah.
possibly might have had a bit of input there as to what they were trying to do, and
Yeah. In
unfortunately
hindsight,
didn't.
yeah, in hindsight, I think they were looking for the sort of, the fan, the
Mm.
by fans for fans.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it just
I'd
it
over.
literally missed the mark on so many points.
At the end of it, when I'd sort of got several of the boxes, I had over 800 cards there to deal out to
Yeah.
players, etc., etc., etc. And if you lost one of the cards and you needed it, it
Right. You're
was
knackered. Yeah.
it was absolutely knackered. And I remember one of the dice going missing, so I went and purchased another, and the set of dice cost 15 quid, which at the time was absolutely
Yeah.
outrageous. Anyway, that was third edition. I know people don't normally talk about third edition, so that's quite unusual. So it did have some good points.
It did.
Its bad points, unfortunately for us, outweighed the good points. And for us, it was a shadow of the old second edition and first edition,
Yeah.
but it was still valid. It still had a point, and it's part of the development up to where we're going. Fast forward, Fantasy Flight Games decide to cut the losses and cease production of the game. So
Yeah.
again,
I remember them saying
oh yeah,
they said that basically they're not going to produce anything else. It's basically a complete.
we
It's
finished what we've done.
when it's
Yeah,
complete. Um, it wasn't selling. It was too expensive, and no one was really as into it
no,
as everyone hoped. It was
no,
basically a dead duck.
yeah. Basically, that that is correct and a correct assumption of it. But you know what? It was a sign of the times. Good on Fantasy Flight. They tried something quite different. It did actually metamorphosize on, if truth be known, into what we saw with the Star Wars role-playing game from Fantasy Flight. Now, again, that's got a lot of fans for it. So that was the basis actually for it. And you could argue on the basis of that, that potentially the
But
Modipius 2D20 system again has elements thereof in and about. So, it has its spot. We'll move on anyway. So they ceased production. Move on to 2018. In fact, it's 2017, I think. An announcement from Cubicle 7, UK company, announcing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
fourth edition,
Fourth
which
edition.
looks like this.
Does indeed.
Now, are you noticing any similarities? Because we all
Yep.
do the time. If you go back, if you put them side by side,
Yep. There you
basically
go.
the same cover.
Yeah.
Again,
It's
it's a wraparound cover. It's a big, massive, thick book. You could do some damage with that, my God.
yeah.
Um,
Plus five weapon skill.
exactly that. It's a +1 rule book that possibly magical, knock you out.
Yep.
Yeah, it sort of it hit the ground running from what I
Yeah.
remember. It
It,
was
but there was a huge fan base there already,
yeah,
wasn't? Let's face it. And Cubicle 7, given the due, they really sort of built it up as well. So they, they
the hype engine was amazing.
yeah,
An awful lot of us were like, oh God, right, okay, the awful experience is the third. Let's not talk about that anymore. Let's move on to fourth, see what happens. And then we were told it was basically a mixture of the best bits of first and second.
yeah,
Music to our ears, amazing, brilliant. We've been literally clamoring for that for years, even during
yeah. It,
third
it,
edition.
yeah, definitely. So the excitement was at all-time high. Now, again, with this edition, it's currently in print as the time of recording. Cubicle 7 are showing no signs of cutting back on what they're doing. There's quite a lot of stuff coming out. Artwork,
Loads.
brilliant. Production quality of the books, again, very, very high.
Amazing. Completely full color inside, full color artwork. Um, it looks like Warhammer. Character creation rules, random. Not a single card in sight. Not
Yeah.
a single tracker in sight. It's not a board game. It's a role-playing game using
2D10, if I remember rightly.
only 2D10. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So that was the advantage because the other versions, first and second, used D6, I think, and other dice as well, didn't they?
Second was the one to go from multiple dice to only using
The D10,
percentile.
the D10 ones.
Yeah.
That's it. Because remember, the original one did have multiple dice there.
Which was
So
never a problem because the system was solid. It
yeah,
worked.
yeah. So this has come out. It's as good as far as it goes so far. I think there's still a lot of room for development with it. Um, from my side, I found combat to be a bit problematic, but with a bit of house ruling, easily sorted. Um, they're developing areas that we haven't seen before. There's Lusteria and other areas of the old world that they're going to be visiting, and that in itself is going to be quite interesting. They've released the Enemy Within campaign again as
Yeah,
well.
they've gone back and released an
Oh,
awful lot of
and it's huge. It's probably 4 times bigger than the original one. There are a few problems actually. We're getting off track a bit here. There are a few problems actually with the campaign in that they don't really sort of gel the various bits at times. So it does require a bit more of a
I
PM.
believe they did try to rewrite some parts and issues, but I believe there are still chunks of it that don't quite fit
They
together,
don't. I
unfortunately.
I would still recommend picking them up because you can run those with first and second edition as well. This is the great thing with
Yeah.
a little bit of work, and it's only a little bit of work. The modern stuff you could use quite comfortably, adventure wise, with the older editions. Third edition, it'd be a bit more difficult because of all the various components and other
It's
bits.
still
But
possible. I believe out there are still sites you can sort of get information on how to convert it. I mean, that's
yeah,
something we could look into as well. We could
yeah. Well, we'll look at those
see
another
about
time.
that. Yeah.
But yeah, so here we are now with fourth edition from Cubicle 7. Like I
Yes.
said, the release schedule is there. There's lots coming out for it. Um, your basic opinion of it, Chris?
My opinion on fourth edition. To be blunt, I don't like it. After having played it and try to run it, and when I say try to run it, as a rule book, it's absolutely chock full of options to the point where it gets a little confusing as to what the actual core of the system wants to be without having to sort of get past this sort of overload of options, because it's the book itself is peppered with sidebars of options. Now, personally, that's too much.
Yeah, I can understand exactly where you're
Personally,
coming at. Yeah,
personally, this is just my personal opinion. If you're going to have options, either have it as an appendix at the back or downloads on a website.
yeah,
Um, you know, and the way some of the rules have been written are very complicated. They're not. It doesn't flow. Second edition has got this writing style. It flows. The rules are incredibly well laid out.
yeah,
It's minimalistic in the fact that there's no options presented, and you can homebrew all kinds of things.
yeah.
Whereas fourth edition to me is like it's like a homebrew edition.
Hmm.
Like I can see what they've tried to do with it. They've literally tried to sort of please everybody, but it's not quite got there.
Yeah.
Personally, that's the way I think.
No,
Um, you know,
it's a valid point. It's perfectly valid. Maybe we'll actually sort of take an in-depth look at fourth edition going forward, and I can fully appreciate what you're actually sort of saying there. Now, from my side, I did have problems initially with combat and also magic. The other issue that I had with it was the bloat, as in rules popping up all over the place, and also through various volumes that came out. And it really did seem to sort of struggle, or you can struggle with it.
mm,
That said, I love the starter set. I think that's a great introduction to the world of
yes.
Warhammer. My
Start
favorite
set.
edition, yeah, my favorite edition over all of these, I'll come to in a minute anyway. But
Here we go.
it's a lot of good points to it. Yeah. Now, do you know what? That is a fantastic product for the price and also the quality of it. It's got everything in there you need. So if you're into Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, or you want to get into it, something a bit different than Dungeons and Dragons, pick that up because it should work for you. It'll give you a different aspect on character genning, how characters actually are. You've got the various character classes. Again, one of my favorite character classes. You end up with a dog.
Mm.
Uh,
Very
who,
vicious dog, if I remember rightly.
yes, that's it. It's actually called a vicious small dog or something
Yeah,
like that, isn't
a
it?
vicious dog. Yeah.
And that's it's the rat catcher that does that
Yes,
one. Yeah, so
that is
uh,
correct. The rat catcher. Yeah.
yeah,
My
and
favorite
it's part of your character
play, actually.
is that. But so there are some great aspects of it, and I would suggest even with the negatives with that, you go and pick it up because unfortunately entry level into first and second edition now it will be very, very difficult.
Incredible.
Anyway, so favorite edition and why? Chris, go on. I'll let you sort of start the ball on this
Okay.
one.
I think everyone's going to guess this, but my favorite edition is second,
Yeah,
and the reason being is because of the absolute sort of wide possibilities and the depth of the whole sort of player experience. It's as a player, you can literally play anything you like.
yeah,
And as a GM, you can run such sort of like strange and weird, twisted games set within literally any corner of the Warhammer world. And it's very unlike most fantasy role playing games
yeah,
where um, you can you can be the you can be the heroes, but they're not necessarily like, the big sort of like shining, sort of sparkly heroes that are going to do good. But then you can play what are the bad guys without feeling like you're doing something wrong. It's like this strange mindset of sort of certain games where, oh, well, we will let you play this, but just bear in mind that it's kind of like morally corrupt. But it's like, well, why let us play that in the first place? Thank you, cat. And it's just, it's so open.
Yeah.
And it's so diverse, I guess.
Yeah.
And system as well is so sort of contained, simple, but also open to home brewing and sort of tinkering with, if that sort of takes your fancy.
Yeah.
And also, you can take elements of fourth edition and slot it into second.
Yeah. That's going to be my reasoning behind going with second edition as my favorite as well. So we agree in this instance, second edition was my favorite, and followed by fourth edition for the source material and the adaptability actually of it. Behind fourth edition for me, just and very slightly, is first edition, and then third edition follows up the rear. Third edition, as I said, does have some redeeming features. There are some good parts actually of it, but for me, it wasn't a complete game in its own, and it was more of a board game. And if I want to play a board game, I'll play a board game. If I want to play a role-playing game, I'll play a role-playing game. And that's where the issue was for me
Exactly.
with the third edition one. But the actual core rules of second edition won me over. Again, you pointed out there was a slimmer volume. That was a huge plus for me. It was much easier to digest, to learn, understand. The information in fourth edition for me is absolutely superb. The campaigns, as I mentioned, brilliant. The information actually within there, it expands upon what was already a huge campaign. So far, it was ridiculous. That the cat's talking to me now. And it really, really did, I think, sort of make it for me. So there we go. Second edition, just behind it, fourth edition, and then just behind that first edition for me. So there we go. That's it. That's Warhammer. We will come back to it at some stage. We'll actually probably have an in-depth look at it. In fact, we'll come back and we'll do an in-depth look at possibly second edition on the back of this. And also, we'll probably come back and do an in-depth look at fourth edition as well.
Certainly will.
Just to sort of,
seeing as we're talking about Warhammer Fantasy Roleplaying and all its editions, there is a what could be classed as maybe fifth edition. I'm not sure. Because Games Workshop have finally brought back the old world.
Yeah.
Cubicle 7 are going to be having a second Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing game.
Yeah.
Third, because they have
Soulbound as well.
Soulbound.
Yeah.
But that's a different sort of setting in its own right. But they are going to be releasing alongside, I believe, fourth edition, a sort of a new version of the old world based around the same timeline as the new tabletop battle game by Warhammer Fantasy. So
yeah,
that will be interesting to look at. Personally, as a fan of Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing and things like that, I would love to see where this is going.
Yes, I suspect it's going to be a D6 system.
I actually do. Well, I do think it's going to be geared towards.
If that's the case, it's going to get a lot of love from me. So, yeah, definitely.
For me, I probably won't go near it because, again, personally, I've got second and I don't need anything else.
That's the good way of actually looking at it. Now, a lot of people might not be understanding what the difference is between old world and all this, especially if they're not too into the Warhammer. So possibly that's yet another video. You'd probably be the best one for that, Chris,
Well,
of
yeah,
actually explaining. So what is Warhammer Old World? So there you go. There's something you can do. See if you can sum it up in 3 minutes. That would be a task and a half. So
yeah,
yeah,
somehow.
you want to challenge. There we go. See if you can do it. I'll allow you five because I'm just
Yeah,
such a
because,
nice
yeah,
bloke. But if you could actually come up with a video to say Warhammer the Old World, this is what it is. Maybe get Al on with you as well.
yeah,
No, that would be a
what we can
30
do.
minute job though, that with Al on.
Yeah,
So
no, we can tend to
just
talk.
just see what you can actually do. Right. Well, there we go. I'm looking forward as well to myself to this Warhammer Old World one in Cubicle 7. We'll
I'm
see where it
curious.
goes.
I am
And
curious.
yeah, I'll be doing updates myself, I think, in respect of that. But for now, hopefully you've liked what we've done here, which is it was just a basic overview of the Warhammer gaming system since the 80s, the role play side. Do subscribe, click like, and what we'll do, we will hopefully see you very, very soon. So thank
Thank
you very much indeed.
you very much.
Bye bye.